Hi, it's Jack Malcolm, and today I'm covering the first C of Max Cred, credentials. Now, do you judge a book by its cover? Whether you say you do or not, of course you do. When you go to a bookstore, the title, the design of the jacket, and probably most important, the author's name will determine whether you even pick up the book and look at it deeper to determine whether you want to buy it. So think of credentials as your book cover. Credentials aren't necessarily the most important factor in credibility, but we cover them first because they are generally the first thing that people see. They actually precede you into most conversations. Before you even open your mouth, most people know what your credentials are, and that's going to color their perceptions of everything that comes after. So think of credentials as your personal value proposition that tell people who are listening to you why you're the most qualified person in the room to be talking about that topic at that particular time. So what are valid credentials? The most obvious is your education or certification. And there's a reason that doctors put diplomas up on the wall, because it impresses their patients, and their patients are much more likely to take their advice and follow through on what they're prescribed. Second, of course, is title. We like to say that we're not influenced by hierarchy, but we all are, and a CEO outweighs a vice president who outweighs a director, and so on. So your title carries a tremendous amount of credibility as well. Third is special experience or expertise that you have. So if you have a track record, or you've been involved with a topic, or you've been involved with a subject for a long time, that's going to carry weight with other people. Fourth is your organization or brand. And think of this as borrowed credentials. A company you work for can have a tremendous impact on your credibility, which is why people used to say that nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Now, another very important credential, believe it or not, it's not a formal credential, but it's the way you come across, the way you look. And your dress, even in today's much more casual business environment, sends a clear message. People who tend to dress up one level above their audience tend to command their respect. If you dress up much more than that, then you're much different from the audience, and that can actually backfire on you. So speaking of backfiring, let's talk about how to present your credentials, because the paradox of credentials is, while they're important and people are impressed with big credentials, they don't want to hear you bragging about your credentials. So if you spend your time talking about how great you are and all of your background, they'll tend to react negatively to that. So what can you do about that? First of all, if you're being introduced, you're speaking to an outside group, or you're speaking to a customer or something like that, have somebody introduce you. It doesn't sound like bragging coming from you, and believe it or not, it's much more believable when it comes from another person. Second is, weave in your credentials in your talk. Use stories, ask questions to demonstrate your expertise. I found that in a lot of sales calls, when somebody says, wow, that's a good question, it instantly sends a message to them that I know what I'm talking about, and I've never even mentioned my credentials. And finally, with your credentials, don't overreach. So don't try to be much more than you're not. If you've got weaknesses in your experience or your knowledge, make sure you bring it out up front, because I guarantee you that if you try to overreach on your credentials, people will bust you down as quickly as possible. Now, the most important credential, of course, is a strong argument bolstered by great content, and that's what I'm going to cover in Max Cred Factor number 2 coming up next. Thanks. By the way, I just want to remind you that if you want more detail on what you're hearing, go to iTunes. I've got a podcast version of every one of these videos. It's about 4 times as long as what you're seeing here.